Welcome to All Things Work. I'm your host, Anne Sparaco. In today's episode, we're exploring how DE&I initiatives need to evolve in light of the White House's recent executive orders impacting gender recognition and DEI programs, specifically those focusing on women, and how organizations can work toward workforce integration, inclusion, and gender parity in the face of these policy shifts. And here to talk about this and to guide us through it is CEO of Linkage, a SHRM company, Tamla Oates-Forney. Well, Tamla, welcome to All Things Work.
It is such a pleasure to be here today. I'm excited about the conversation we're about to have.
And we're excited for your guidance and your wonderful insight you will provide. So let's start off with the mission of Linkage. Can you walk us through a little bit? And as CEO, what are your general goals for the company?
Yeah, the vision of Linkage is to advance and empower women in the workplace to achieve career success. From the backpack, meaning from the time they enter the workplace to the boardroom, that's the time they exit, and everything in between. And the empowerment element of that vision is so important because it gives women the opportunity to define what success means for them. It could be a leadership position, it could be individual contributor, it could be hybrid, remote. Whatever they determine as success is what we want to help them to achieve in the context of the workplace.
And I love that backpack to the boardroom, just from the very beginning, not just when they want to start in a leadership position, but from the very start of their career. And I love that.
Absolutely. And I think companies have focused a lot on leadership because, women were not advancing as fast. And while we've made significant progress in that space, we've done so at the expense of losing ground and losing traction on the pipeline. And so for us at Linkage, it's critical that we focus on the entire career journey from the time they enter until the time they exit. And so I'm excited about that, and I'm excited about what it's going to do to impact not only the women that are going through the programs that we offer, but the workplace at large.
So let's review some stats related to women in the working world, because there's a lot of them here, so I'm going to read them off a little bit. Okay, so women now comprise of 47% of the U.S. workforce and represent the most educated group in the labor market. Now, in 2020, women earned 57.7% of bachelor's degrees, more than 61% of master's degrees, and about 55% of doctorate degrees. In 2021, just about a year later, women held 52% of all management, professional, and related occupations. But here's the catch. They only account for less than 9% of Fortune 500 CEOs as of just 2022. So just comparing those numbers, they make up about almost half of the U.S. workforce and the majority of the educated group in the labor market, yet just less than 9% of the Fortune 500 CEOs. So my question for you is, what exactly do these stats mean to you?
First off, the math isn't mathing, right? If women make up a significant part of the workforce, but they're not matriculating as fast as men in the workforce, that tells you that there is something systemic happening in the workplace. And so let's focus on a few facts and realities in the workplace. The fact is, again, women make up a significant amount of the workforce. They're the most educated, but they're not matriculating as fast as men in the workplace, as evident by the stat that you mentioned in terms of the composition of women as Fortune 500 CEOs. That's a fact, right? The other reality is that, if you think about workforce participation, that's declining. And then you think about the labor pool, it's shrinking, creating a talent scarcity. So it's incumbent upon you, when there's a scarcity, that you need to focus on the supply and the demand. Women make up a significant piece of the workforce. And so if you want to optimize your talent in the workforce, women have to be a part of your talent equation. And it's not at the exclusion of men. Right?
Exactly.
And this talent scarcity creates demand. Demand will influence focus, and focus will drive outcomes. And so women have to be a part of an organization's talent optimization strategy and equation if they want to win, because there is a scarcity of talent. So as a company, it's incumbent upon you to make sure that every talent that you have within your organization, you're getting the best and the most out of them. And women have to be a part of that.
Yeah, especially in leadership roles as well. And so what should organizations do to address these disparities?
Well, I think you first have to recognize that they exist. What I advise companies to do is do an assessment of your talent within your organization to make sure that, again, you don't have disparities as it pertains to attracting, retaining, and developing talent. And if you do, you have to ask yourself why and what can you do to alleviate or minimize those disparities. And so first recognizing that there is an issue, and when you figure out what their issue is, how do you solve for it, but do so in an inclusive and a non-disparaging way.
And that's really great for employers to keep in mind. This is why we appreciate your guidance here today, especially in a time when we're, seeing many developments, come through. So that leads us to the notion of workforce integration. So what does this actually mean from your perspective?
So for me, workforce integration is creating an environment where all employees can collaborate, contribute, and thrive on an equal footing without discrimination or bias. Really simple. And it's not just an ethical imperative, it is a business imperative. Research shows that organizations that tap into the full potential of their workforce are better positioned to innovate, compete, and perform financially. And at its core, DE&I was created to remove systemic barriers through inclusive means, creating access and environments where all can contribute and have the chance to succeed. I mean, the truth is, if we're honest, not all DEI programs have been inclusive, but we cannot abandon those that have been, right? Instead, we must evolve, given the current climate, address any disparities that exist, and continue refining our strategies to make sure we're creating fair and equitable opportunities for all. So said differently, we have to evolve if we want to solve.
I love that. I'm going to keep that phrase, evolve if we want to solve. And, Johnny C. Taylor Jr., our president and CEO of SHRM, has always said, and he keeps repeating it, diversity is our strength.
It really is.
And I love that. So how and why should DE&I programs evolve to bring about this workforce integration you envision?
I think historically, many of our diversity initiatives were focused on representation and improving representation of the underrepresented, namely focused on gender and ethnicity, right? And at the exclusion of the overrepresented. So that led to unintended consequences and also feelings of exclusion. So I know definitively that a focus on women is very vital, but sometimes some of those initiatives were myopic in scope, and they failed to show kind of a direct correlation between why they were doing it and the business outcomes it was driving. And they didn't really address the systemic barriers that prevented the underrepresented from succeeding in the workplace and advancing in the workplace, inclusive of helping leaders thrive and survive in leadership positions. And so for those reasons, I think that, when we're developing and evolving our practices, we should start with the following question. Why are we developing these programs? And what are they intended to solve for, right? We need to be crystal clear about those two things. Why are they being developed? And what are they solving for? And how are these things linked to business strategy, be it the short term, medium, long term? Those things are very important. Also, I think companies need to address, are they going to have the talent that they need today and tomorrow? And if not, will the programs that they're implementing help better position them to have the talent that they need in order to accomplish their business goals and objectives? And those things are very important. So again, just really make sure you understand the why behind it and that it's aligned to things that are going to move the business forward in a very inclusive and an objective way. And I think those are things that the programs need to address, right? And make sure that you're creating access for all. And so when you are looking to put these programs in place, or companies are looking to put these programs in place, there are 3 pieces of advice that I give companies to make sure that It's all around, they're solving for workforce optimization, meaning they're getting the most out of every single talent that they have available within their organization. So optimizing their workforce, right? The second thing, is it driving for collective success, both for the individuals that are benefiting from the program, but is it enhancing and benefiting the organization as a whole?
Right.
And then last but certainly not least, these things should not be short-term focused. They should be long-term. And so are they sustainable in terms of their practice and efforts? And so those three things are critical when it comes to developing programs that are focusing on optimizing your workforce and advancing talent in your workplace.
I love that. And I love how you talked about, establishing the purpose, establishing that foundation for not just the short term, but the long term.
Yes, absolutely.
It really, really helps when it comes to business strategies. So SHRM has just released its BEAM framework, which stands for Belonging Enhanced by Access Through Marriage. Now, the framework takes organizations through a series of questions they can use to start analyzing their existing D&I programs. This is just, step one in that evolving process. So how do you see this framework specifically relating to questions around gender in the workplace?
I think it can be applied towards all programs because, again, we're solving for fairness, not favoritism.
Right.
And you want to do an objective assessment of the programs that you have to make sure that they don't have any unintended consequences. So I think the BEAM network, it really provides simple guidance and a quick reference point by which you can self-assess where you are against those things and determine what additional actions or experts you need to engage in order to make sure that your programs are fair and legally sound.
So I would love to dig a little deeper on this. How can organizations design viable women-focused programs in the face of these new executive orders on D&I? Because it may raise concerns around compliance and fairness.
I think, it just goes without saying, I think women-focused programs must be designed inclusively, but still be able to address the unique needs that women face. And I'll give you a couple examples. And I call this kind of the same but different approach to things. And here are a couple of policies and practices that really speak to that. For instance, parental leave. We used to have just maternity leave. And now companies have evolved their maternity leave to be parental in scope, meaning that both men and women have access to leave, paid leave, after the birth of a child. They both have access to that. But typically, the female is entitled to more time because she is the one giving birth to that child. Right. So it's the same policy that they both have access to, but the difference comes in the utilization of time because the woman has a unique need that makes it a little different than the man. So that's a policy that's the same but applied differently. I think FMLA is another one of them, our family medical leave. The eligibility is the same, but the reasons for the utilization could be different depending on the circumstance. So you can have a policy, but the application and the practices may be different. And then last but certainly not least, I think, talent development programs. The key is making sure that every employee has access and the opportunity for development programs. So providing access. Open programs can be very effective. In fact, that's often the case. But there are also times when they need to be separate because the needs are different. But you're still solving for development. An example of that are programs, talent development programs for military veterans, for instance. They may have unique needs that are different from mainstream in the workplace, but we're all focused on helping them develop. So that is consistent in that regard. And then at the Leadership Institute that we host, we have a kind of a same and different approach where we have a convening of all people into like our keynote sections. So everybody attends the keynote sections. But then we have developmental and specific and targeted breakout groups that could address the unique needs of individuals. For example, we have breakouts for women, for men, military, students, and alumni. So they gather together and then they go to breakout sessions that are designed to address their unique needs. even though those things are designed to address their unique needs, it's still open access. Anybody can come. So I think you can do, do the same but different approach, because you're granting everyone access to the learnings and developmental opportunities, but you're also solving for the uniqueness of an audience. And those are types of things that you can do. And I think I've given 3 practical examples where those things can be true. And you're focusing on women, you're focusing on men, and they're not exclusionary, but you are doing something that's tailored to fit what their needs are.
And I love that, because you're welcoming people to learn more about others and to share their own experiences, or learn what maybe their needs might be. And I think the more people learn, the better, the workplace can be. And
I think we are recognizing that there are differences, and where similarities exist, we can capitalize on that. But we also have differences.
Right.
But the key to all of this is fairness, not favoritism, and making sure that opportunities to learn and develop are accessible to every employee, even though they may have some unique needs. And so, the other thing I would say is we can't have a one-size-fits-all approach to workplace disparities, right? If we could, then we probably would be in a better place. But it just doesn't work that way, because we have different needs, unique needs in the workplace, and we need to be able to solve for those while maintaining the integrity of the focus of being able to develop all the talent, because it goes back to workforce optimization. We're trying to get the best out of every single person that's in the organization, and they are entitled to make sure that we're able to deliver on that.
It's a beautiful balance to strike. And so thank you for those, especially those concrete examples, for people to really kind of imagine, what we're talking about here. And so as the CEO of Linkage, we'll leave you off with this question. How do you see the company being a go-to resource for organizations, leaders, and the HR community who need this ongoing insight and guidance around the new executive orders, but not just that, but just this shifting workplaces and workforce that we are seeing, that through the view of inclusion?
I think our new mantra is, if it's a work thing, it's a SHRM thing. SHRM has been in existence for 76 years. Linkage has been in existence for 36 years. So there is power in the collective. And I think, I know that we want to be the go-to for all things work, because, again, those years of experience give us credibility. We are all research-based and data-informed. And we are the convener of fact-based information and subject matter experts. There's a reason why 30-some thousand people joined our first webinar, and I'm not sure what the numbers are going to be like for our others, but they're seeking guidance and clarity in terms of how they should interpret and how they should engage and how they should, change or pivot as a result of what's going on in the world of work. And we are that trusted partner and confidant, if you will, that they go to, because they know that we will guide them with a steady hand, with data-informed decisions, and with expertise.
And you guided us extremely well just through this episode alone, so I'm sure that more people will understand that Linkage and SHRM, is a great resource. So if it's a work thing, it's a SHRM thing. Don't forget it. Right?
Thank you so much for having me. And this is a journey that we all are on. Just stay true to equity and fairness, fairness, not favoritism, make sure you're creating access for all, and you're working towards something that's going to be collectively successful, both for the individuals and the company at large.
Wonderful insight. Thank you so much, Tamla, for joining us on this week's episode of All Things Work.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, that'll do it for this week's episode. You can get new content each week with the newsletter and research. Just go to shrm.org/allthingswork. That's it for this week. We'll catch you next time.
SHRM.